parents called me a loser and laughed out loudly, but then I came into the room. "Hello, clumsy," my mom said. I smiled and showed them a document that made their faces turn pale. I don't know why I expected anything else. I entered my parents' house without knocking, as I always did. The key in my pocket was more a tool than a symbol of belonging. I was useful, and that was the only reason I had access. I was the one who paid the bills, bought the food, paid for my brother's college tuition. I had convinced myself that this was what family did, support each other no matter what. I had just come from the bank. I wanted to tell them something big. Something that would make a difference. But as soon as I walked in, I heard them talking. And laughing. I wasn't even in the kitchen, just standing in the hall, but their voices carried. My dad was the loudest. "He's such a loser. Can you believe he actually thinks we appreciate what he does?" I stopped in my tracks. My mom let out a short laugh. "I know. He actually thinks we like having him around. It's pathetic, really. He acts like he's some kind of hero, but really it's just sad." Then my brother chimed in, his voice full of amusement. "Hey, at least he's useful. He's basically my sponsor right now. I wouldn't even be in college without him." They all laughed. I stood there, frozen. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it all. I had spent years telling myself that this was what love looked like. That this family wasn't perfect, but they were worth sacrificing for. That they needed me. That they wouldn't be okay without me. When my wife left me 3 years ago, she told me something I refused to believe at the time. "Oliver, you're drowning yourself for people who wouldn't lift a finger for you. You think they love you because you pay for everything, but the minute you stop, you'll see what they really are." I told her she was wrong. I told myself she was bitter, that she didn't understand family the way I did. But standing in that hallway, listening to her laugh at me like I was nothing but a joke, something inside me broke. I should have walked out. I should have confronted them. I should have said something. Instead, I forced myself into the kitchen. My mother saw me first. Without missing a beat, she gave me her usual greeting, the one she had used since I was a kid. "Hello, clumsy." As always, she expected me to just take it. To brush it off and play along. I smiled. I don't even know why. But I smiled. Then, without a word, I reached into my pocket and pulled out the document I had been waiting to show them. I put it on the table in front of them. The room fell silent. My mother picked it up first, but my father quickly leaned over to read it. My brother sat up straighter. I watched their faces change. The amusement drained away, replaced by something else. Panic. Finally, I spoke. My voice was calm, steady. "I sold the house." And at that moment, everything changed. For the first time in my life, they had nothing to say. My mother's mouth opened and closed as if she wanted to speak but couldn't. My father snatched the paper from her hands, his eyes darting over the words. My brother just sat there, his expression frozen in confusion. You what?" my mother finally managed. "I sold the house," I repeated, slower this time. The silence stretched. It was as if they were still trying to process what I had just said, as if their brains refused to accept it. But this is his house." My mother's voice was suddenly sharp as she pointed at my brother. "He needs that house." I scoffed. "He doesn't need anything. He's a grown man. He can figure it out." My brother shot up from his seat. "You're kidding, right? You wouldn't really sell him." "I already have," I said simply. "It's done." My dad slammed the paper down on the table. "Why the hell would you do that?" I took a step back and crossed my arms. "Because I got tired of being used." That hit a nerve. My mother's face twisted into something ugly. "Oh, please. You think we used you? You offered to help. We never forced you." I let out a short laugh and shook my head. "Right. You never forced me. You just made me feel like I was the only thing holding this family together. You made me pay for everything without even asking if I was okay. You made me give up my home, my money, my time because you knew I was desperate to feel like I mattered. You do matter, my mother snapped. Your family. Funny, I said. Because a few minutes ago I heard you calling me a loser. The room fell silent again. My dad looked away. My mom's mouth pulled into a thin line. My brother shifted uncomfortably. I shook my head. Yes. I heard everything. You don't love me. You love my money. And now that it's gone, so am I. I turned to leave, but my mother's voice stopped me. Wait. I looked over my shoulder. Her expression had changed. The anger was still there, but something else was creeping in. Something calculating. How much did you sell it for? She asked. I felt my stomach turn. What? The house, she said, her voice softer now, more cautious. How much did you get for it? I stared at her. That was what interested her. Not me. Not the fact that I was leaving. Not the fact that she had just been caught tearing me apart behind my back. Just the money. I almost laughed. I almost pitied her. I shook my head. Doesn't matter. You won't get a cent. And with that I walked out. I made it halfway down the driveway before I heard the front door slam. Oliver! I turned around, expecting my mom or dad. But it was my brother. And he was running right at me. Liam grabbed my arm before I could take a step. Oliver, wait. You don't understand what you just did. I yanked my arm away. Oh, I understand perfectly. I finally stopped being your personal ATM. He looked over his shoulder at the house, his face pale. He wasn't angry like our parents. He looked scared. This isn't just about the house, he said, lowering his voice. You don't know everything. I crossed my arms. Then start talking. He exhaled and rubbed a hand over his face. Mom and Dad, they're in deep. Like really deep. I just found out last month, but they've been lying to you about money for years. I frowned. Lying how? They're in massive debt, he admitted. They took out loans they couldn't afford, ran up credit card bills, and even refinanced their house. They thought you'd just keep bailing them out, so they never stopped. A sinking feeling settled in my gut. You're saying they plan to use me forever? Yes, he said. And now that you've cut them off, they have no way to pay. I stared at him, processing. Part of me wanted to believe he was just trying to guilt me into staying, but something about his reaction felt real. It's not my problem, I finally said. Liam's expression darkened. You don't get it. You owe money to dangerous people. My stomach twisted. What kind of dangerous people? He hesitated, glancing around as if afraid someone would hear. The kind that doesn't just send letters. The kind that makes people disappear. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Who? I demanded. I don't know, he admitted. Dad never said. But I heard him arguing on the phone last week, talking about how he needed more time. He sounded desperate. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. But then I remembered their voices from the kitchen. Their laughter. He's such a loser. Pathetic. Embarrassing. They never cared about me. They only cared about what I could do for them. I clenched my jaw. Not my problem. I turned to my car, but something made me stop. A black SUV was parked down the street. I hadn't noticed it before, but now that I looked, I realized it wasn't just parked, it was watching the house. The engine was running and there were two men inside. One in the driver's seat. One in the passenger seat, tapping his fingers on the dashboard. They weren't looking at me. They were looking at the house. Liam must have followed my gaze because he whispered. They'd been there since this morning. My heartbeat quickened. Why didn't you say anything? Because I don't know if they're here for me, or for you. I slowly turned back to him. Me? Liam swallowed hard. Mom and Dad told them about the house. They were counting on you to give them some of the money from the sale to keep those guys off their backs. I felt my blood turn to ice. You're telling me they sold me out? Liam nodded grimly. They told them you had the money now. I didn't say anything. Not to Liam, not to my parents, and definitely not to the guys in the SUV. I just got in my car and drove away. I didn't want to get involved. Not anymore. I knew Liam expected me to react, to scream, to demand answers, maybe even to change my mind and give them the money. But I was done playing their game. That night, I moved in with my uncle. Not because of some great revelation, not because I suddenly saw the truth, but simply because I didn't feel like renting an apartment on my own. My uncle had offered before, and at the time I didn't take him seriously. But after what happened, I thought, why not? The next morning I finally told him what was going on. He listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. My aunt was in the kitchen, pretending not to hear, but I knew she was listening, too. When I finished, my uncle leaned back in his chair and exhaled. "Oliver," he said slowly, "you know they're lying, right?" I frowned. "About what?" "Everything," he said. "You don't owe anyone money. There's no dangerous debt. They're just manipulating you again." I blinked. "Liam said." "Liam is just as brainwashed as you are," my uncle cut in. "They tell him what they want him to believe, just like they did with you. They adapt to the situation, like always. You cut them off financially? Suddenly they have mysterious debts and dangerous people after them. Convenient, don't you think?" I opened my mouth to argue, but I couldn't. Because now that I thought about it, it was convenient. Too convenient. My uncle shook his head. "They've been doing this for years. First it was Oliver, we need help with the shopping. Then it was Oliver, your brother's education is important. Then it was Oliver, you're a good son, you wouldn't want us to struggle." I felt my stomach churn. "It's always something," my uncle continued. "And each time, they made sure you were the solution. And now that you're leaving, they're scrambling. They're throwing everything at you, hoping something will stick." I sat there silent. Deep down, I think I already knew he was right. I just didn't want to admit it. My aunt finally turned from the kitchen. "Oliver, listen to me," she said firmly. "Cut them off. Completely. You think we're not talking to them for no reason? You think we're the bad guys? We've been where you are. And we learned the hard way that they don't change." I looked at them both. My uncle, who had never asked me for a dime. My aunt, who had never guilted me into anything. And I realized something. The only people in my life who had ever made me feel like I owed them anything were my parents. And for the first time, I allowed myself to wonder what life would be like without them in it. I should have known they wouldn't let it go. The very next day, just as I was getting settled in at my uncle's house, my parents showed up. I was in the living room when I heard the angry knock on the door. Before I could react, my uncle was already on his feet, muttering, "Here we go," as he went to open it. As soon as the door swung open, my mother stormed in without waiting for an invitation. My father followed, looking just as angry. My brother wasn't with them, probably too embarrassed to show his face. "You think you can just walk away from your responsibilities?" my mother snapped, shaking her finger at me. "After all we've done for you?" I scoffed. "Everything you've done for me? That's funny. Because from where I'm standing, I'm the only one who's done anything for this family." My father crossed his arms. "You're being selfish, Oliver. Your brother is still in school. Your mom and I are getting older. You owe us." There it was. That word. Oh. I let out a bitter laugh. "I owe you? You mean after I gave you thousands of dollars? After I let my brother live in my house while I lived in a tiny apartment? After I spent years making sure you never had to worry about anything?" My mother scoffed. "Oh, please. That was your choice. We never forced you." I clenched my jaw. "No. You just manipulated me into thinking I had to." "Watch your mouth," my dad snapped. "We're your parents. You owe us respect. You owe us support. And you certainly owe your brother his education." I opened my mouth to argue, but before I could say anything, My aunt stood up from the kitchen table holding a steaming cup of coffee. I barely had time to process what was happening before she marched over, stopped in front of me, and dumped the coffee on the floor. Silence. Dead, heavy silence. Everyone just stared at her, stunned. Then she looked up at my parents, her face unreadable. "Get out." My mother blinked. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," my aunt said calmly. "Get out of my house." My dad's face turned red. "Now listen here, Dash." Before he could finish, my uncle stepped forward, standing behind my aunt like a stone wall. His voice boomed across the room. "Yeah, you heard what she said. Get out." For the first time, my parents looked uncertain. My mother looked at my father. My dad looked at her. They were used to being in control. They were used to me caving in, giving in. But this wasn't my house. And they had no power here. Without another word, they turned and walked out, slamming the door behind them. The second they were gone, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My aunt turned to me and crossed her arms. "You see now?" I nodded slowly. "Yes. I see." And for the first time in my life, I felt free. I thought my parents would try to guilt me into giving them money. I thought they'd keep pushing, keep manipulating, keep pretending to need me. But I never expected them to throw me away. It started with another phone call from Liam. I didn't answer at first. After everything, I had no reason to. But when he called again, then a third time, I finally answered. "You need to come over," he said right away. "Now." I frowned. "Why?" "They're making an announcement," he said, his voice tense. "You're going to want to hear it for yourself." That sent a strange shiver down my spine. "What kind of announcement?" "You'll see." I considered ignoring it. Let them do whatever stunt they were planning, I was done. But something in Liam's voice made me uneasy. So, like an idiot, I went. When I got there, they were waiting for me. My parents were sitting in the living room like they were about to have some formal event. My mother had her hands folded in her lap, her lips pressed together in forced disappointment. My father leaned back, arms crossed, his face set in stone. Liam stood off to the side, shifting uncomfortably. I barely had time to process the strangeness of it all before my mother spoke. "Oliver," she said in a cool voice, "we've made a decision." I stopped. "What decision?" My father exhaled loudly. "You've made it very clear that you don't want to be a part of this family anymore. You've shirked your responsibilities, turned your back on your parents, and left your brother to fend for himself." I let out a short laugh. "Struggle? Liam, are you struggling?" Liam didn't answer. My mother continued as if I hadn't spoken. "Since you've decided to be so selfish to care more about money than your own flesh and blood, we've decided that we no longer consider you our son." I blinked. "What?" "You're being disowned," my father said flatly. "You are no longer a part of this family." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. Waiting for some hint that this was just another manipulative tactic, some way to scare me into crawling back. But their faces were serious. "You have become ungrateful and arrogant," my mother said. "We've done everything for you, and this is how you repay us." "Everything for me?" I repeated, feeling something dark well up in my chest. "Are you serious?" My father stood up. "Since you don't care about us anymore, we've decided not to return any of the money you gave us. Consider it payment for the years we spent raising you." That made me laugh. A cold, humorless sound. "Oh, that's rich. So not only are you cutting me off, you're keeping every single cent I ever gave you?" My mother lifted her chin. "That money was never yours to begin with. It was meant for the family. But you've made it clear that you're not part of that family anymore." I looked at Liam. "And you just stand there? Let them say that like it's normal." He looked at the floor. "I told you to come so you could hear it from them." I turned back to my parents. They weren't moving. They were actually doing this. Disowning me. Keeping the money. Wiping their hands clean as if I had never existed. I had spent years bending over backwards for them. Years of trying to be the perfect son, the one who provided, the one who made their lives easier. And now that I was no longer useful, they threw me away like garbage. I let out a slow breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Okay. My mother narrowed her eyes. Okay? Yeah, I said. Okay. You don't want me to be a part of this family? Fine. But don't come crawling back when you realize you can't survive without me. Then I turned and walked out. And this time I didn't look back. I thought I would feel something. Sadness. Regret. Some kind of grief for the family I was leaving behind. But as I walked out of that house for the last time, all I felt was relief. They had disowned me, but in reality, I had been the one to keep them in my life for years. I had convinced myself that family was everything, that my sacrifices meant something, that if I just gave enough, they would finally love me the way I wanted them to. But love doesn't have a price tag. And they never loved me. They loved what I could do for them. After that night, I cut them off completely. No more calls. No more visits. No more money. At first, they tried to act like they didn't care. My mother even had the audacity to post on Facebook about how her ungrateful son had abandoned her in her time of need. My father told relatives that I had turned my back on my family for money. But the funny thing is, when you stop feeding leeches, they don't get stronger. They wither. I later heard from my uncle that things were starting to fall apart for them. Without me funding their lives, they actually had to budget for the first time in decades. My brother had to get a part-time job to cover what I used to pay for. My parents tried to guilt other relatives into helping out, but no one was stupid enough to fall for it. Eventually, they stopped trying. And as for me, I moved on. I stayed with my aunt and uncle for a while, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. No more guilt. No more pressure. No more sacrificing myself for people who would never do the same for me. I got my own place. I started saving money for myself instead of throwing it into a bottomless pit. And you know what? Life is better without them. People say that cutting ties with your family is one of the hardest things you can do. And maybe that's true for some people. But for me, it was the easiest decision I ever made.